This is the Light of Truth radio broadcast with Michael Boldea.
It's the Light of Truth radio broadcast. I am your humble host, Michael Boldea. And as always, it's good to have you with us. It's good to be back again. Another week has come and gone, and the old playbooks are being dusted off because, it was inevitable. It was something that could have been predicted even by the lowliest of the American prophetic crowd. But given that the popularity of the big orange man has not waned, they had to go on to the next thing, which is judicial activism. So if you don't know what's been happening in these United States of America, apparently one lowly judge somewhere nobody's ever heard of has more power to control the lives and future and direction of these United States of America than the president and the federal government. And I know that everybody's screaming checks and balances, but this isn't checks and balances. I'm sorry, when you are demanding that criminal gang members with rap sheets, and these are not minor felonies. This isn't like, oh, he stole some Hubba Bubba because he really wanted to try the watermelon flavor. No, these are guys who committed to their way of life. They got the face tattoos and the chest tattoos and the hand tattoos. They're all in, baby. It's not as though this was something that they didn't consider or something they got into lightly. Once you start inking your face, you've pretty much determined the course of your life to a certain extent, especially if the tattoos in question are Tren de Aragua or MS-13 or any some such. But there's a broader issue here. I've been thinking about two things this morning. And by the way, this is a recorded broadcast. Today is March the 27th, the year of our Lord, 2025. So it's going to be fresh. I don't know how well the intro blended in with my beginning to speak because Gino is in Romania. I know some of you are thinking, but how? It's technology. It's a beautiful thing. So I didn't hear the intro music. This time he did give me a tepid countdown. And so hopefully it all gets blended together and you wouldn't have even noticed if I didn't bring it up. But yeah, if something was a little off kilter, if it sounded like I waited a couple of seconds too much to start speaking, well, now you know the reason. So what's been happening in the world, in these United States and everywhere else in between? Every week is a whole new story. The story this week, and again, it's one of those things where if not for the hypocrisy, just the blatant hypocrisy, I'd take the time to hear what these people have to say. But they're just just utter hypocrites. The whole thing was some message between Pete Hegseth and Vance and a couple other people got leaked, or an extra number got added to their whatever it was, the thing that they send messages on. And I think it's grounds for the entire administration to just resign. I think the noble thing to do would be for the big orange man to hand Kamala Harris the keys to the White House and say, you know what, we failed. A couple of messages got leaked. And it wasn't war plans, as they like to say. It was just back and forth regarding some future thing. But these were not war plans. Again, Hegseth put out a tweet or an X or whatever you call them nowadays. I don't know. I don't have that kind of time. I got kids. But he put out a tweet saying, it shows that none of you have ever seen war plans if you thought this is what war plans look like. And he has a point. Now, I understand that a lot of people are out for blood. Who is it? The latest is the man who was follically challenged from Arizona, Senator Kelly, oh, Hegseth must resign because he's unqualified for the job. Well, first of all, he's very qualified for the job given his military record. The troops love the man, and lest we forget, I know we don't like using our brain capacity to any extent unless it's to fight other people on Facebook, and that's fine. You do as you will, but lest we forget, there was a senator from California, yay. Her name was Dianne Feinstein. Dianne Feinstein had a Chinese spy as her personal driver for 20 years. That's 2 decades. Dianne Feinstein had a Chinese spy as her personal driver for 2 decades, and nobody called for her resignation. Nobody called for the entire Democrat, uh, you know, political complex to come crashing down. Now I know that there are some people who you're just naturally put off by. There's a handful of people that do that to me. That seem so slimy that even when I look at their face without them saying a word, I'm like, ugh, something is off here. One of those people, to me, you might love him. You might think he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. But one of those people that does that to me, and I'm not going to say he gives me the ick because I would never say that. I would never use that term. I'm not a teenage girl. I'm a grown man, well into his 50s now. Well, actually, well into his 50th year by 10 days. So I'm not going to say he gives me the ick, but something's off about the man. And I think eventually, the more we discover about the proclivities of this individual, the more we'll understand just how utterly disturbed he is. I'm talking about Senor Swalwell. Senor Swalwell got caught in a honey trap by a Chinese spy. If you don't know what a honey trap is, it's a woman or a man. I guess it depends on your perversion and proclivity. I don't know. I'm not going to get into it. But in this case, it was a woman who Mr. Swalwell was overly enthused about because she gave him the time of day. She was a Chinese spy. Mr. Swalwell had an ongoing relationship with this woman, and it wasn't playing pinochle, and it wasn't playing Tetris, it wasn't even playing Monopoly. The kind of relationship they had was more horizontal than it was vertical, if you get my meaning. And yet, Mr. Swalwell continues to sit on a lot of committees that he has no business sitting on because his judgment is shown to be flawed. But this is what happens every single time. Go back to 2016. They did that to Mike Flynn to a certain extent. They did that to a couple of people that were loyal to the administration and to the big orange man, because you can't, if you've ever played chess, I know I'm going off the rails. That's all right. It's just a rainy Thursday in Wisconsin. I don't know about Romania. I'm sure Gino's enjoying the sunshine, but here it's rainy and icky. I said the word icky. I will forever feel the shame of it, but it is nevertheless an apropos description of the weather today. If you remember in 2016, allow me to take a sip from my delicious beverage and we'll continue. Any individual who showed loyalty to the big orange man was sidelined either by judicial issues or forced to resign or other things. They're trying the same playbook all over again because they understand that the people, the ones they're able to so readily sway, are seeing past their lies. They're starting to see the reality of just how corrupt their own political party is. Not that the Republican Party isn't corrupt, but the corruption doesn't go as deep. And as far as the individuals that the big orange man has surrounded himself with this go round, I do believe, I know a lot of you disagree, but I do believe a lot of them have a desire to see the continuity of this nation. They are patriotic. One of them being Pete Hegseth. I think he's a very stoic individual, and they can't have that, because if you remember, back after they got rid of General Flynn and a couple other people, the one that really came to the fore was Milley, and General Milley had already assured his Chinese counterparts that if the big orange man asked for the nuclear codes, he wouldn't give them to him. Now, granted, this man was never tried for treason. He got a full pardon from Mr. Robinette Biden and his auto pen. But nobody discussed these things. Nobody went after these individuals that were provably treasonous. But now they're clinging on to this message that went out that didn't have war plans, but that was, likely a private message between a few high officials in the government. And apparently, the talking point is that the entire administration should resign. So Kelly called for Hegseth's resignation. I don't believe he's going to resign. I think that they learned a lot from 2016 through 2020. And you can see who they deem as the most dangerous individuals to their agenda, to their cause, by who they're targeting. So right now, there are two big bad wolves. It's not even the big orange man anymore. I think Elon Musk's and Pete Hegseth took a lot of the strain off of the big orange man, because as of yet, I'm sure they're coming, but as of yet, they haven't filed any articles of impeachment against the big orange man, because rather than blowing his nose in a kerchief, he decided to suck his boogers back in his nose. And that right there, that's worthy of an impeachment if ever there was anything worthy of an impeachment. So the machine is still at work. Judges who have, let's say, a bias, let's call it that. Let's say that they have a bias, are beginning to rule because they understand how popular the agenda of the administration is. And they understand that if this administration manages to pull off the things that it plans on pulling off, they've got nobody to run in 24. They've got no hope of winning another fair election, especially if voter ID goes in for every state, or if you have to prove citizenship in order to vote. So right now, they're trying to run out the clock for the next 2 years so that the same people who are trying to hamper the big orange man's agenda to the utmost can point to the fact that he failed in 2022. Actually, no, wait. 2027. I know you're thinking to yourself, what are you talking about? That's how quickly time flies. They can point back to 2020 in 2027 and say, see, look, he didn't keep any of his promises. The best way I can compare what's going on is if somebody signed up to run a race and they promised everyone within earshot that they were going to finish the race no matter what. And the same people that heard they were going to finish the race were standing on the sidelines and just whacking at the person with sticks every time he passed by. And eventually, after a broken leg and after a lot of pain, the individual can no longer finish the race that he promised he would finish. And the same people that were hitting him with sticks will point the finger and say, see, he didn't keep his word. He didn't finish. That's the only reason they're doing what they're doing currently as far as the judicial activism is concerned. Because they understand you don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand this. Even somebody like Nancy Pelosi or Eric Swalwell or any of the other ones, even Bernie Sanders understands this. The average citizen is happy with the idea that murderers and rapists and thieves that shouldn't be here because they're here illegally are being arrested and deported. And so you have a judge going, nope, that we can't have that. You got to bring them back and put them back on the street. And you're thinking to yourself, how much of this kind of thing can the average citizen just swallow in silence before the whole idea of justice being blind and equal application under the law goes out the window and people start getting angry? Because you have one judge that said, nope, you can't deport illegals, you can't arrest them, you can't do anything other than allow them to be. There's actually a judge on the West Coast, of course, that has given an order. I know, you're thinking to yourself, boy, these judges have a lot of power. Well, if you remember, I know it's been a while, but maybe a week ago, Chuck Schumer came out and said the quiet part out loud. Chuck Schumer said, we have judges in place that will do everything they can to make this agenda stall out. They'll do everything they can to try to curb the enthusiasm of this administration with just one judge after another saying things they know are not constitutional, saying things they know they have no authority to say, but once a judge says it. So a trio of federal judges in California declared on Tuesday, which was 2 days ago, that El Presidente Donald Trump must welcome roughly 40,000 refugees approved by El Presidente Jose Biden and his deputies. We welcome this continued relief for tens of thousands of refugees who will now have the opportunity to restart their lives in the United States, said Melissa Keeney, the progressive lawyer for the elite-funded anti-border International Refugee Assistance Project. And this is a fine line that I don't know if this administration can walk, because you have activist judges everywhere deciding on all manner of things. There was one judge that asked why a person's preferred gender rather than their actual God-given natural gender is no longer applicable on driver's licenses. So it's gonna come to a boiling point. There's no way around the fact that this will come to a boiling point sooner or later. And every single media outlet is trying to paint every little thing in the worst possible light. Like I said, this administration should all resign. The big orange man should hand the keys of the White House over to Kamala Harris, and then everybody would be happy, wouldn't they? Look, any person that goes to work in the morning, comes back in the evening, has a mortgage and a family to feed, is applauding the reality that criminals are taken off the street. And it's not, well, are you saying only illegals are criminals? No. There's criminals everywhere. I just read this and it frightened me. because there's no safe space. There's nowhere that's safe where you can, at least my kids are safe. 2 female teachers are accused of sexually abusing a male student at a Christian school. This is at a Christian school. 2 former teachers at Nathaniel Green Academy, a private Christian PK-12 school in Siloam, Georgia, have been arrested and charged with multiple felonies alleging improper contact with the same male student. The 2 teachers have been identified as 60-year-old Sherry Del Malden and 25-year-old Elizabeth Brown, according to news release from Georgia Bureau of Investigation. Now, the one caveat to rounding up gang members and rapists and murderers and kicking them out of the country is that the people that are supposed to be looking into such crimes will likely have more time to uncover this sort of depravity. They'll likely have more time to investigate when 2 teachers at a Christian school are abusing a student. Malden, who was arrested on Monday, was charged with improper sexual contact by an employee, agent, or foster parent, aggravated child molestation, and statutory rape. Brown was arrested on March 21st and charged with pretty much the same thing. The GBI said they began investigating allegations of contact between the student and the teachers on June 14th, 2024, after they were contacted by the Greene County Sheriff's Office. Now, if every single sheriff's office and every Federal Bureau of the Eye office are overwhelmed with crimes committed by MS-13 and Tran de la Lagua or whatever, do you think they would have ever gotten around to this? So it's not just, oh, we need to have compassion. Yes, we need to have compassion on individuals that want to emigrate to this country legally, that want to assimilate, that want to become American citizens, get a job, pay taxes, and reach for the American dream that is out of reach for most people. But most of the individuals that are being rounded up are only here because they see America as easy prey. I don't see any MS-13 gang members with face tattoos working as waiters or busboys. I don't see any MS-13 gang members getting their doctorate in chemistry, because what was that thing, Michael Moore, the effervescent and increasingly large Michael Moore said, you're going to deport potential people who are going to cure cancer or stop an asteroid. And again, the hypocrisy is what's glaring, because you could use the same exact argument when it comes to abortion. And I'm sure if the individual that's going to cure cancer gets deported, he'd likely be able to cure cancer wherever he gets deported. However, if you murder a baby before it has a chance to breathe its first breath, if they were going to cure cancer, that's never going to happen. So one is worse than the other. But again, the hypocrisy of these people, that's what's galling to me. People like Adam Schiff, who have no leg to stand on, who just naturally lies. Remember when he said he saw evidence of the big orange man in some Moscow hotel? There's evidence. We know there is. Like, all of these people, everything they're trying today, they tried in 2016 and 2017. And my only hope, excuse me while I cough. I know you're thinking to yourself, don't do it on camera. I'm not planning on it. Give me a second. Whoop, there we go. See, look at that, professional. You didn't even notice that I coughed. And I know you're thinking to yourself, demonic attack? No, it's just the weather. It's the weather. There's no sunshine. When the sun is shining, everything is glorious. When it's gloomy and rainy, it's not. But this is what's happening. These people will not go quietly into that good night. They're not going to give up, and they understand that their message of murdering babies, allowing criminals to roam the streets and bludgeon old ladies without arresting them is not resonating with the average citizen. Sure, are there some dullards? And I've seen the pictures of the people who are doing this, the individuals that are trying to scratch up Tesla cars or trying to burn them. They're men in pajama bottoms. They're people draped in rainbow flags. These people understand that their way of life is ending. There's no more teat from which to receive succor via free stuff from the government. And anyone that has a job says hallelujah. Because I, for one, would rather be able to take my kids to eat some pasta at the Olive Garden than pay that extra $100 because he, she, they, them, zim, zer needs antidepressants because he allowed himself, herself, itself to be mutilated, and now, well, I'm just depressed. Average, logical, thinking individuals don't have an issue with their streets being safer, with their streets being cleaner, with their government projecting enough power where foolish people don't do foolish things, believing that there's going to be no reciprocity. The entire messaging of the Democrat Party has collapsed. And right now, the only thing they have to cling to is activism. The only thing they have to cling to is violence, hoping it gets people to just put their head down and shut up and not say anything, because I don't want my car lit aflame. I don't want my car scratched up. So let's just ignore them. We tried that. And the more we ignored the problem, the more vociferous the problem became, the bolder the problem became. And every time somebody said, this isn't right, why are men in dresses bouncing little kids on their knees? You got called a name. Well, the name calling era is over. Nobody cares. I'm going to protect my children, even if you call me a dirty name. I'm going to protect my children, even if I hurt Bob's feelings because he took so long on putting up his makeup and fitting into the dress that I should just allow him to cradle my child. So at least that era is over. And the speed with which this administration is doing the things it promised it would do is frightening them. It's scaring the pants off of them because they understand if it keeps going at this pace, come 2 years from now, most logical individuals will go to the polls and say, I like the trajectory. I like where we're going. Look, I can walk to the park and not live with the fear that somebody's going to jump out of a bush, stab me in the stomach, and steal the $13 in my pocket. I can take my kid to the playground and not be in fear of some pervy dude in a wig and a dress trying to give him a lollipop. They understand their messaging doesn't resonate with the average citizen. It resonates with a very fringe minority. And the thing they were able to pull off between 2020 and 2024 was convincing the majority that they were the minority. And that was a really tricky thing to pull off. Because, man, everywhere you looked, Everyone and their brother seemed to be in drag. Everyone had trans kids. Every Hollywood star has a trans kid or five. It's like it's spreading. Look, I must be the one that doesn't see it for the fabulousness it is. No, they were lying to your face. They were projecting a false reality. It was all astroturf. It was people getting paid to say a certain thing, hoping to convince those that disagree with it to keep silent so they could keep pushing their agenda. That was the only thing that it was. And right now, everyone's seeing the emperor has no clothes. And they're terrified of this. They're terrified that they didn't have enough time to implement all of their progressive agenda. I know I hate that term, but it is what it is. And didn't have time to make it law. But they still have enough individuals throughout the country that will use judicial activism as a way to impede what this administration is trying to do, so that come 2 years from now, they can point back to the failures and say, see, they didn't do anything they promised. They're not going to mention the fact that some judge in the middle of nowhere has decided that, hey, we can't just kick out murderers and rapists. We have to give them due process. We have to hear them out. No, you don't. They're here illegally. They came into this country illegally. Therefore, you can legally kick them out of the country they came into illegally. I don't understand why this is such a big issue. However, it has become and will continue to be an issue. Another article I ran across was that an Illinois law may force religious employers to hire people who take actions that contradict their sincerely held religious beliefs, such as undergoing or performing an abortion, a new lawsuit claims. It doesn't matter what you want, silly peon. Shut up and pay your taxes. Wear a helmet. Walk outside your door and put on a helmet just in case some nutter butter decides to take a bat to your head. That way, it'll just hurt a little, but it won't give you brain damage. Look, this thing will come to a head. American Prophetic, this thing will come to a head. There will be something that will spark the anger and the righteous wrath of the average citizen, because people are taking it upon themselves to tell individuals, a majority of the individuals in this country, that their way of life, the way they see the world, the way they want to live, isn't only immoral, but it's unlawful, it's illegal. So either you submit or you will be punished for not submitting. Again, Illinois, I understand. I live in Wisconsin. I'm next door to Illinois, and Lord knows Wisconsin isn't doing any better. And right now we're about to have the local elections in Wisconsin, and we'll see how that pans out. But if you thought these people were just giving up, no, because there's too much at stake. They have too much to lose. It's been uncovered, and I think only a small percentage of the corruption has been uncovered. And you see that somebody like Stacey Abrams, if you don't know who she is, Google her, had $2 billion in grants for a fake NGO that she spent. And apparently, $2 billion wasn't enough money to fix that gap in her teeth. Maybe if it was 2.5. This is how activism gets funded. This is how all those unwashed people with the pink hair and the septum rings and the signs, this is what motivates them. It's not a sincere belief in the things they're saying. It's somebody paid me to do it. And the money was coming from your tax dollars. The money was coming from grift. And they cannot do away with that and continue to cling to the power that they have. They're terrified. And everyone knows the analogy of what happens when you corner a rat. That's when a rat becomes dangerous, when it's cornered. That's when it's willing to go toe to toe with somebody bigger than them. And however I look at this, and I've been looking at this from all angles, basically, however you look at this, it has to blow up somehow. There's no rest for the weary over the next 3 years. It doesn't matter how much this administration gets done. It doesn't matter how many things that the people voted for they implement. It's still going to come to a head. Because if they were allowed to implement their agenda, then come 2028, J.D. Vance would be a shoo-in. But even now, look, this is, I've said this before, and it's apropos today too. This is why we can't have nice things. My mom used to say that to me every time we broke a glass, even though the glass was from the Salvation Army and it was 3 cents. Yes, back in those days, thrift stores were actually thrift stores. Things were actually cheap. And there was a thrift store about 2 blocks away from where we lived, and all of our plates and all of our cutlery and all of the glasses and cups came from that place. They were like 3-5 cents if it was a little nicer. And every time my brothers or I would break a 3-cent glass, that was my mom saying, this is why we can't have nice things. And I never had the heart to tell her that they weren't really that nice to begin with. But even now, there are people within the Republican Party positioning themselves. There are people within the Republican Party trying to seem like the moderate voice to what this administration is doing, not realizing they don't have a chance of winning another election if they try to impede this agenda. I think for a lot of people, whether you agree with it or not, this administration was the last hope for America that they clung to. Because if it had gone the other way, if it hadn't been too big to rig, right now what's happening in Illinois would be a nationwide federal mandate. And there would be no judges that would say, hey, this isn't right. Remember back in the day, again, I have what some might call an elephantine memory. I remember everything. Back in the day, the actual Supreme Court of these United States told Mr. Robinette Biden that he couldn't just expunge a bunch of student debt. And Mr. Robinette Biden came on the air and spoke to the American people and said, hey, the Supreme Court said I can't do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. Where was the outcry? There was none. But yet, some lower court judge says, nope, you got to bring all the criminals back. I'm sure that some of them will sue for compensation because, they were emotionally scarred by being taken to where? El Salvador, was it? And put in that prison. So you're telling me that the previous administration could disregard a Supreme Court ruling and still do what they wanted to do. But this administration should retire and resign utterly because the planes with the criminals were already in the air when the judge gave his order and they didn't turn them around. This is the kind of game that is being played. And you need to understand it, because once you understand the kind of game that's being played, it will tamper your expectations. Because a lot of people have big expectations. And you know what? They may have the best of intentions to do everything they promise to do, but every time they try something, a judge says no. And by the time it gets to the Supreme Court, it's going to be 2026, 2027. The midterms are here. And that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to run out the clock, hoping they can convince enough people to swing the Congress and the Senate. And if they swing the Congress or the Senate or both, then you're going to see the whole impeachment thing again. Because right now they've got no leg to stand on. Even if somebody put in articles of impeachment for the big orange man for, chewing with his mouth open, they wouldn't have the votes. So 7 establishment Republican senators opted to anonymously, yes, brave men all, anonymously attack Vice President J.D. Vance, earning critiques from the likes of Donald Trump Jr., who concluded that these were the same cowardly neocons who've constantly trashed his father over the years. And again, the descent is just beginning. Because they're positioning themselves, it's all about power. It's all about the next election cycle. It's all about, where can I be 4 years from now that'll give me the biggest odds of getting elected to a higher office? Because these people are political animals. And the ones in the administration that are not political animals, that actually prioritize the nation over their own egos, you will continually and constantly hear calls for their resignation, for them being thrown out, and all these other things. Because it's these people consider anyone that doesn't put their ego or their self-interest above the good of the nation as a virus that must be expelled. They don't see it as the natural course of someone that chooses public service. They see those individuals as viruses that must be expelled from Washington, D.C. Otherwise, they may get the entire body sick. These establishment senators voiced their frustrations privately. To the Jewish Insider, according to the outlet, they pointed to the remarks Vance made in the leaked Signal group via The Atlantic, taking issue with the vice president's suggestion that the Houthis are more of a problem for Europe than the United States, and his voicing of doubt that it was in the U.S.'s interest to strike Iran-backed group in Yemen. Because, excuse me, while I cough again, that's twice. That's the last time, I promise. I'm back. You didn't even notice I was gone. Because the whole point is permanent war. The whole point is constant and continual and permanent, sales of armaments, sales of defense weapons. And if you decide that the only thing you're interested in is your nation's well-being, and that other nations should take up the slack and be responsible for their own defense, that goes against the idea of the globalist agenda. I know, I said globe again. In that vein, Zelensky has declared that the Ukraine will never cede occupied territories to Russia, and suggests that Trump is being naive about Putin. If they are unwilling to secede, or cede occupied territories, then the whole idea of peace talks or ceasefires or something along those lines is a non-starter. Russia is not going to give any of the territory it occupied back. That's not going to happen. I'm sorry, Mr. Zolinsky. I understand that you were an actor and you're pretending to be a tough guy once, but it's never going to happen. And I think enough people have had secret conversations with Volodymyr Zelensky, telling him that, oh, we got your back. We're going to continue funding you. We're going to continue sending you weapons. Who was it? The English are already preparing to send soldiers on the ground. And I think this is giving him the boldness that he otherwise wouldn't have to say these things. Look, if they're going to come to some sort of agreement, both sides are going to have to give up something. So the idea that Ukraine will never cede the occupied territories to Russia, then it's a non-starter. Then all of this idea of peace and all of this isn't going to go anywhere, and Europe is going to be dragged into war. And then we're going to have to make the choice as these United States of America, whether to back Europe's play and start glowing in the dark with everybody else. Speaking to the French paper Le Figaro, ahead of yet another summit in Paris, Zelensky once again appeared to have been emboldened by, there you go. I hadn't even read the article. All I did was read the headline. And I already told you the why. I already told you why he feels himself as having a steel spine. I didn't have time to read the article because, my prep consists of maybe 3 minutes of trying to get on, what's this thing called? StreamYards, and making sure that Gino can hear me. So, yes, I didn't read the article, but it makes sense, doesn't it? Speaking to the French paper Le Figaro, ahead of yet another summit in Paris, Zelensky once again appears to have been emboldened by European allies as they expressed a hardline position towards Moscow in the ongoing US-led negotiations. One thing is certain. We will never cede our occupied territories to Russia. These lands belong to the Ukrainians, Zelensky said. Then you're just wasting gas going to Paris. All of this is a non-starter because the Russians aren't going to give it up. Sorry, that's just the reality. Am I for it? Am I against it? I'm not Russian and I'm not Ukrainian. It makes no matter to me. In this world of ours, the strong subjugate the weak. That's the reality of the world we live in. Do I wish it were different? Yes, I do. But fairness is not in the cards. For Ukraine, fairness is not in the cards for most of the world and what's coming. It's not about fairness. The day will come when the lamb and the lion will sit together and smell the spring flowers in the meadow. But until that day comes, the strong will always attempt to subjugate the weak. And right now, as the big orange man pointed out, you don't have a hand to play, kiddo. That's just the reality of it. When will we get them back? Probably not right away. This may have to be done diplomatically. Diplomacy causes fewer victims, he added. Well, but you don't want diplomacy. You want what you want. And what you want is not tenable. That's just the reality of the world we live in. Since the 2022 invasion, Russia has seized most of the territories in the Ukrainian regions of Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, Zaporizhia, in addition to having taken over Crimea in 2014. While Ukraine showed surprise early successes against the much larger Russian army, I think the successes that they showed were largely propaganda-driven. I believe that a lot of the stories that came out were pure fabrications, but that's just me. I know. What was it? The Ghost of Kiev? Remember that one? Yeah, I do too. You remember the guys on the island saying, "Do your worst"? That didn't happen either. So all of these stories that were like, "Yeah, look at that, manly men, men that have hair upon their chest," it never happened. So I'm skeptical of any information that has come out over the last 3 years, when the biggest stories that the West clung to as demonstrating that the Ukrainians were winning turned out to be fabrications. Fool me once, shame on you. I know, I'm sure George Bush Jr. learned that saying by now. Fool me twice, shame on me. While Ukraine showed surprise early successes against the much larger Russian army, after 3 years, the initial mobile war was soon descended into trench like conditions and became relatively static. It's not static. The Russians currently, and I know, Lindsey the Gentleman Graham would still like to see Vladimir Putin killed. Who's going to take his place, Lindsey? Nobody knows. But there might be somebody that it's not as even tempered. Let's put it that way. Hmm? Because some of the people in close proximity to the seat of power when it comes to Vladimir Putin and those surrounding him that would likely take his place, some of them are known to be less than reasonable individuals who've been encouraging him to just push the button, wipe him off the face of the earth already, and be done with it. And he hasn't. So the only way you can ensure that the individual who replaces Vladimir Putin will be more amenable to the West or more amenable to Ukraine is to have our government put in a puppet as, doing our bidding. And I don't see that because everyone that surrounds that is within the axis of power of the Russian government currently, none of them are friendly to these United States of America. They're all wolves. And the fact that Vladimir Putin was able to hold on to power for going on 3 decades should tell you a lot about the man, given that he's surrounded by predators. So the only way a predator remains in power while surrounded by predators is to be the apex predator, to be the most ruthless, to be the most final in his decisions. And he's done it for 3 decades. I don't believe that Vladimir Putin wants World War III. If he did, he would have lobbed a few missiles into England and it would have been done. But I can't say the same about the individual who's going to replace him if Lindsey Graham has his way. The Russians, for their part, try to assert these regions are rightfully theirs, noting that many in the areas are Russian speakers, although, of course, by this stage, most Ukrainian speakers will already have fled. Ahead of the peace talks in Riyadh, earlier this week, U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff said that Ukraine's and indeed the rest of the world's willingness to acknowledge that it had lost the territories to Russia would be key to whether a peace settlement could be reached between Moscow and Kiev. And now, Mr. Witkoff, you have your answer. Mr. Zelensky say, no, we want everything back. Not going to happen. So here we are. Another week has come and gone. I know you're thinking to yourself, only 1 week. Indeed, only 1 week. Gino hopefully will be back next week. He'll be able to count me down as he usually does or fails to do, depending on the day. But all we can do is press on. We can't control global events. We can't control who decides to go to war with whom. But what we can control is the amount of time we spend in the presence of God. What we can control is the amount of time we spend praying and reading the word and learning to trust him. Because the day is coming, and I do believe it's sooner rather than later, when your trust in the omnipotence of God will determine whether or not you're able to maintain your sanity. I think that's the nicest way I can put it. So spend the time wisely. I understand it's a lot easier to keep scrolling up and down every news outlet trying to figure out what's going to happen next. But God's in control. He knows what's going to happen next. So the only thing that's incumbent upon me is to cling to him, to trust him, to grow in him, so that when the day comes, I won't have to cry to the heavens to send a herald. God will be there. His presence will be known. He will answer without being called. And with that, I thank you all for listening. We started recording a little earlier than the hour on the hour, so I think I'm going to give Gino a couple of minutes if he's there. I'm sure he has a lot to say, being in Romania and enjoying all of that delicious, delicious Romanian food. So, Gino, are you there? All right. Well, if Gino's not there, then I shall continue to speak to you. I know we didn't mention it, but we should. Please keep the people of North Carolina in your prayers. The fires are still ongoing. Please keep the Christians of Nigeria in your prayers. Please keep the Christians of Syria and Saudi Arabia in your prayers, because there's a lot of Christians that are hurting. There's a lot of Christians that are being martyred. And as children of God and as the body of Christ, we must feel with them and pray for them and lift them up before the Lord. Gino, are you there now?
I'm here.
Gino is there, everybody. Hallelujah. Everyone breathe a sigh of relief. Gino, my friend, you've got 3 minutes. So tell us of your trip or whatever else God puts on your heart. Proceed, young man, proceed. God bless you for your prayer.
Thank you, Mike. My trip's going very well. We've been going to several churches that Hand to Help build, and seeing God work in power. Lots of prayer, worship. We were in meetings last night in Satamari, and we had 5 hours of church and prayer, and it was wonderful. And the Holy Spirit's working in power through the gifts. Even young people have the gifts of the Spirit. It's really amazing to watch. We're so grateful to be here. We leave tomorrow for London for 3 meetings there. But I want you all to know, as people that have supported Hand of Help, if you came to Romania, especially the northern part, you would be so blessed to see over 50 churches that this ministry helped build that are on fire, most of them full of people praising the Lord. It's really amazing to see. It's unbelievable. And the work in Boldea goes forward, and it's just a blessing to be able to come here. This is my 25th trip. I've been able to sing. I've been able to do music. Pastor Kent's with me from Watertown, Wisconsin, our church there. And every night is like just a lesson in how, when you seek the Lord, especially in these churches, you've been through persecution and trials. But when you seek the Lord as the body of Christ, you see God work in just ways I wish and pray would happen more in America. I know that we have good churches in the United States, but we just need more God's Spirit and Holy Spirit work in the churches, and that's what I see here. Dimitri Duduman was a wonderful brother. People remember him to this day when you travel around northern Romania. He left a great testimony, Virginia, Boldea as well. And everyone that supported this work, I want to encourage you, if you came here, you would see firsthand that your money and prayers have really done a wonderful work here. And thank you for the prayers. Thank you for supporting this work. Thank you for helping the widows and the orphans. And we just want you to know you also are in our prayers. Keep Mike Sr. in prayer as well. And thank you for listening to the Light of Truth radio broadcast. Thank you for listening to today's broadcast, The Light of Truth with Michael Boldea. If you would like to order a copy of today's broadcast, please visit our website at handofhelp.com. If you have questions about our ministry, you can email us at handofhelpoffice@aol.com or simply call us at 920-206-9910. God bless you.